If for everyone on the line and all of our presenters, we're going to go ahead and get started. Charlie, thank you for sharing your screen and for being here with us today. I want to welcome everyone here to the Floral Industry Research Joint Project on B2B e-commerce. As many of you have known throughout the year, we have been working with a total of 9 trade associations on this project with Charlie and Melinda, who have been our wonderful researchers for over a year now. So thank you all for everything that you've done to help make this project come to fruition. My name is Alton Mullins. If I haven't met you, I'm the Executive Vice President of WFSA. I'm pleased to be able to host this for you all today and really want to thank every one of these organizations that you see on the screen that really made this presentation and this research project happen. As Dr. Hall starts to go through his presentation, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping with everyone. You'll see, as you all have noticed, the chat feature. That is a wonderful way to communicate with each other. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature. If you'd like to submit any questions, which Charlie and Melinda will address at the end of this presentation, please submit that through the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring that and we'll be able to go through your questions as soon as we get through all of the other information. So we want this to be an active and interactive discussion. So please ask whatever it is that interests you. To get us started today, I wanted to introduce Tim Dewey. He is WFSA's president now and is with DB Flora. Tim has been involved with this project throughout this whole wild and crazy year and would like to say a few words about it to get us started. So Tim, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Molly, appreciate that. Just to give you some background, last year, as Molly mentioned, 9 floral trade associations banded together to produce a comprehensive research study looking at the floral supply chain. The goal of the study was to determine changes in the industry, how firms conduct themselves in the marketplace, and gaps in available information and techniques. After the first stage was completed, 5 major gaps were identified as needing further research to understand the impact on our businesses. One of the major gaps exposed was the current usage of business-to-business e-commerce technology in the floral industry. This project became particularly relevant after the shift towards the digital platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the results have been really eye-opening for us. So, what trends and analysis did the research uncover? Today, we have Dr. Charlie Hall with us, who will address the study and what he and his research team uncovered. Many of you know Charlie, but for those of you who don't, Charlie is well known for his expertise in the production and marketing of green industry crops. His major research, teaching, and extension areas of specialization include strategic management, market situation outlook, cost accounting, and financial analysis for green industry firms. Charlie currently serves as the Chief Economist for American Hort and co-chair of the Advisory Council of Seed Your Future. He is the former president and past president of the Board of Directors of America in Bloom. With that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Charlie Hall.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Tim, and I appreciate that introduction. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't introduce my research colleague, Dr. Melinda Knuth. She's there on the right in terms of on my right in terms of the webcams. And Melinda was a PhD student of mine right up until the end of August. And she worked on a number of projects, including this one. And in addition to getting a PhD in horticultural sciences, it's almost an honorary degree in ag economics because she took so many classes and then just happened to get a statistics certificate on top of that. So she's forgotten more stats than I think I ever knew, but she's very talented. She doesn't work for me anymore. I'm very remiss about that. She's a postdoc at the University of Florida. Golly bum. Anyway, we still collaborate. We still meet on Fridays to talk about projects we have ongoing. So Melinda, feel free to jump in and add anything in case I miss anything as I'm going through here, because I love what I'm doing and I love disseminating information And I get hyped up sometimes, and I'll forget a key important point, and I'll bring up other important points I didn't think I was going to talk about. So we'll see what comes out today. All right. So the original RFP, when Molly sent that to me, was basically, as Tim summarized earlier, to benchmark industry trends, that is, driving forces of change, and what was causing people within the floral industry to stop and take notice and do something different. Really, that's really what we wanted to identify as those driving forces. And then along with that, the gaps in the information that we couldn't find. So we did an exhaustive literature search across multiple dimensions within the literature, and conducted 41, I think it's 41 or 43 personal interviews with floral folks across the industry. So we gleaned a lot of information, and we came up with a report. It's called Driving Forces of Change. And Molly can tell you about how to access all that towards the end. And those were the 8 forces that we identified. And Tim, I just pulled them back in real quick just to remind people. We looked at supermarkets and the effect that they've had over the last 3 decades in our industry, and how the competitive nature of the industry has changed with the advent of their coming into the industry. And then we looked at the increased traction of the online segment. And that's really part of what promulgated this research today and the gap we identified, because we didn't find a lot of information on that particular segment. Then we talked about the direct-to-consumer channel and its emergence, and the B2C components of our industry, and the shifts in knowledge and perceptions of floral products and services, and the changes that have occurred in those perceptions demographically. Right? And that bodes well for our future as you look at some of those trends, as well as the advent of event studio, or what we call lifestyle florists. And some of those are actually online today, so welcome. And you were innovators, right, in the industry. And so that changed the whole face of the retail side of the industry, as well as the technology. That was another segment that we did a deep dive in. And then also we noticed a lot of changes in funeral, the nature of funerals and how people were conducting funerals, and the use of flowers within those funeral services. And so we did a deep dive on that. And then lastly, supply chain logistics, transportation, shipping flowers by boat versus air all the time, and the technologies in terms of cooling and making sure that the product remains shelf ready all through the system. You got innovative products, like Express from Smithers Oasis and Floral Life, where you've got, you eliminate a lot of cuts through the system. So we did a deep dive on those technologies, and that was pretty exciting. Anytime you talk about new stuff that's coming down the pike, that's pretty exciting. And so all that's in the report, as well as those causes for concern, like the lack of data, like the tensions among industry participants, the siloing, if you will, that has developed over the years in the industry. And the current inventory management practices was a red flag, as well as some of the resistance to change. And I think, Molly, you'll see some of this come out today as I'm going through these results, some of that resistance to change, at least in certain sectors within our industry. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And of course, the availability of labor. Now, getting on to the main event, right? Those gaps, and that the prevalence of B2B e-commerce, and how prevalent was it, or is it, within the industry, and how are we using these tools and these technologies to further our industry? That's what we did the deep dive in. We conducted a survey over the summer to look at this particular issue. But I found this graphic the other day, and I thought it'd be cool to introduce this in this particular PowerPoint. This is U.S. e-commerce penetration. And you can see the growth rate since 2009 in e-commerce. That's a respectable growth rate, Tim. I like that growth rate right there. But then, a la COVID, we absolutely grew. We had 10 years worth of growth in 3 months because of COVID. And what we heard from several players in the industry is that it gave us permission to take a chance. It gave us permission to do things differently than we had ever been doing them before. It gave us permission to think outside the box. It gave us permission to worry less about channel conflict and some of those silos that I referred to earlier. So this was, while COVID, we don't wish this on anybody. And contrary to many tweets that we read, we're not rounding the corner, right? We had 100,000 cases over the weekend, 90,000 cases. There were caseloads are still going up. Death rates are going up. This is a serious issue. However, it has caused some change, and I think some of that change is permanent. I don't think folks, Molly, are going to go back to doing everything the way that they used to. I think we learned some things there. All right, so the topics. I'm going to talk about some of the demographic characteristics of the sample frame, the 306 respondents that we had in the survey, the perceptions that they have of e-commerce, how much they use e-commerce right now. And Tim, this was perfect timing in terms of doing the survey. We did this in July and August. This was not right after the start of COVID. So we had a little bit of experience with COVID. It was perfect timing to come in and do an assessment of the static time period of how well we're incorporating these e-commerce tools and technologies in our businesses. Because if we weren't doing it before, for sure, we were attempting to do it then. And so we were able to measure that. It'd be very interesting to do this another 2 years and see how far we've advanced down the pathway. We also look at a deep dive in omni-channel, because I've worked very closely with a lot of industry firms, and that's a buzzword, right? We all talk about omni-channel and how we are engaging in omni-channel. I got a little surprise for us in a little bit. All right. And then lastly, switching the gears, we looked at how folks utilized e-commerce both as a seller and as a buyer, right? And so most of my comments on the front end are going to be as sellers, as we're engaging our customers and selling this. I want to talk about how well we are utilizing these e-commerce tools, and then we're going to flip the switch and then talk about it from a buyer standpoint. So as I mentioned, we had 306 responses. You can see the breakdown in terms of types of firms. We tried to get everybody who's anybody within the floral industry. 44% of them were florists, 19% wholesale florists, almost 15% growers, 7.2% manufacturers and distributors, just shy of 6% importers, 5.2% online florists, 5 supermarkets, 3 wire service, and a partridge in a pear tree. You know, we got everybody that we could, every sector represented here. That's because we didn't want to leave a gap while we were trying to fill the gap. So, all right. So, number of locations. We have a lot of fragmentation within our industry, and there are some multi-site firms, but by and large, either, none, one site. There were a few, about 20%, that had anywhere from 2 to 5 sites that they were operating out of. There were some larger firms over here that had more than 10 locations. We got some wholesale distributors on the line and other folks, they have multiple locations. So that's when we asked them about how many people do you employ, again, a lot of small firms. These were probably most of our retail florists, right? And although there are some larger ones, and then as the number of employees goes up in this chart on the left, of course, you have fewer people hiring that many people, except we have kind of a bipolar response here where there's more than 200 employees. We had 13% of our sample frame that hired that many employees. Now, when you ask them and say, okay, how many of those are working in e-commerce? The numbers go way down in a hurry, right? So part-time employees, 66% of the respondents hire at least a part-time employee. And then another 30%, 1 to 5 employees have B2B e-commerce responsibilities, right? So it was a mixed bag. How many years they've been in business? We had a few newbies here, about 3% that just started within the year. can you imagine starting a business this year in the midst of COVID? Oh my word. 2 to 5 years, yeah, another 7%, all the way to, we had some more experienced folks. I don't like to say the old word, right? It's the more experienced folks over here that have been in business more than 20 years. So I liked seeing that diversity within the group, what we've talked about so far, as well as the geographic coverage. We had both local coverage, state and regional, had domestic and international coverage. So again, I think we had a fairly representative sample frame to work off of. And when you look at it by type of firm, again, we looked at brick and mortar florist, online, wholesale florist, domestic, international growers, importers, distributors, and manufacturers. Now, when I say distributor, I'm not talking about wholesale floral distributor, right? I'm talking about mainly a distributor of inputs, right? And particularly, domestic growers here, for example, would buy some stuff from BWI, BFG, Griffin, those kinds of distributors. All right. So again, the geographic coverage was very different depending on which segment you're talking about. So we started out asking folks, what's your perception of how much you're going to be integrating e-commerce over the next 5 years? Well, how much do you expect of your revenue to be generated from e-commerce over the next 5 years, or 5 years from now, right? And you can see almost a bell-shaped curve, half a bell-shaped curve. We had 31%, somewhere between 1 and 20% of the revenue is going to come from e-commerce, all the way up to 4%, where the bulk of it was going to be e-commerce. And then obviously that's probably online florists and those kinds of folks. But they had different expectations. That's one of the things I want to set the stage with, is the different expectations from the get-go in terms of how e-commerce was going to play a role in their business. Now I popped this chart back up here on the right, because I wanted to show this is how the e-commerce industry is really growing. And then this is kind of our adoption, that's not a trend line, but that's just the usage by the number of people that said that they would use it by that percentage. But that's my point, is that it should probably be inverted the other way, depending on how wisely we use those technologies in furthering our supply chain. Now, I've been talking about e-commerce tools and technologies, and it just kind of rolls off my tongue and everything, but what am I talking about? Well, this particular table, I've got 32 different tools and technologies, Tim, that I'd put under that e-commerce label. And that's where Melinda and I, we were searching the literature. We grabbed everything we could see that would even apply to e-commerce and threw it in the bucket and asked people how much they use, both as a seller in the left column, the middle column as a buyer, and then of course, neither. And you see more red over there in the neither, right? I took the highest number, I think, on each line and made it bold and red. And now we've got things like affiliate marketing, analytics of the e-commerce applications, comparison engine feeds, content delivery, content management. I don't want to go through and read all these because it's in the report. Speaking of which, I have defined, or I don't want to leave Melinda out, we have defined each one of these applications in a glossary in the back of the report. All right. So if you take, what do we mean by fulfillment? Well, we're talking about software that actually helps in terms of the order processing and lining up transportation and making that fulfillment process easier. And it's all automated. Right? It's not, you don't have people entering in by hand and so forth. It's all automated. And then things like live chat, mobile commerce, and there's only a few here as a seller that people are using. Now, this is everybody combined, right? Now we have every type of entity broken down in the report.
And
And
in separate charts.
I know there's tables all over this report. It's an economist heaven. But there's so much data in here, and you don't have to sort through the data trying to figure out, all right, if I'm an online florist, what data applies to me, because we separated it out for you, right? So we have all that data by type of firm, and we did some cross tabulations, et cetera. Now I'm seeing a bunch of questions in here, Molly. So you feel free to jump in and stop me if you see a question that I'm talking about right then. You can interrupt me with a question if you want to.
Thank you, Charlie. One, just when you were talking about the demographics, is we had one member ask, what is the difference in when you research between a distributor and an importer? How did you categorize them differently?
Yeah, well, importers, of course, are members of a fief, and they're bringing in flowers mainly, but distributors are, again, input distributors. That's the main distinction of inputs that are used. And my example of the growers is a good one, where you would buy containers and you buy, or sleeves and whatever from a distributor, not necessarily a manufacturer distributor, but a distributor. And they're separate and distinct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now I got another page of this, right? That's just the first page. And then this is the second page of these tools and technologies in terms of online advertising, order management, security is a big a fast moving component of e-commerce right now because of all the intervention that we have from different countries. And so shipping carrier integration, right? You got packages, you can have Armalini built right into your system where it has all the different trucking functions. So it's actually very eye-opening when you start delving into all the applications that are available. It's mind-boggling. And see, we don't have anybody in the list here we got one item that's above 50%, where more than 50% of the people are in this industry are using that e-commerce tool, and that's social media marketing. Well, that doesn't surprise me a bit, because we've done a very good job as associations. Almost at every single association event I go to, there's a social media marketing presentation or session. And so we've focused on that, and we've taught people how to do that. And so that should be 97.1 instead of 57.1, but you get my point. All right, so there's these tools and technologies, and the usage is there, but it's not knocking my socks off in terms of the percentages. Now, when you get down to breaking it down by firm, by type of firm, then we see some market differences fall out, Tim. Like for the wholesale florist, only they identified 2 of the 32 tools that they use regularly.
Yeah.
What's that?
50% or more of the firms identify 2.
Yeah. That's right. 50% or more of the firms identified that they use that tool. Thank you, Dr. Statistician, for correcting me on that. That's the proper way to say that. Now, brick and mortar florists only use 2 of the tools more than, or 50% more. I just said it. I got to say it again. Now look at online florists. They used 22 of the tools were used by 50% or more of the firms. See, I got it right that time. Supermarkets, 15 of the tools. Wire services, 23. And then on the right-hand side, I don't even go through these low numbers. Manufacturers, I was pretty proud of manufacturers using 23 of the 32 tools, right? They were tied with wire services there, and the online florist there for the lead, right? So it depends on which sector. Some sectors have embraced these e-commerce tools more rapidly than others. And I'm not knocking anybody. You don't have to engage in e-commerce to be successful. I'm just saying that as the industry changes, the likelihood of you having to adopt some of these e-commerce tools and technologies is going to be increasing over time. All right. Now, we talked about, we asked the respondents to think about their websites, their e-commerce websites specifically, and what sort of services were they providing, whether it's live chat, shopping carts, videos about product, international shopping, whether customer ratings and reviews, taxation, delivery options was the number one answer on the board by far in terms of what they're offering on the websites right now, not 5 years from now, but right now, the services that they're offering on their website. So that was the most popular response. And again, this is everybody together. I don't have time to break it down by each group for each one of these areas that we looked into, but that gives you an idea of the rate of usage. You can see these percentages down through here, and then you see this one. All right, now payment. Now we do have how to get paid figured out, right? And so do you accept the following payment methods on your website? And 82% said, yep, we can use credit cards on our website, no problem. Some have customer accounts. You got various others used. None of those are over 50%. So that's kind of a cutoff. Why 50%? I don't know. It sounded good. Really, I have no rhyme or reason. I'm just saying that if I'm going to say that a sector within this industry is using this particular tool, it seems logical to me that at least half of them are doing that for me to say this sector is using it. Otherwise, they're kind of dabbling in that. All right, so you can see the different payment methods. We got getting paid figured out. And then by type of business, you can see that regardless of the type of business, we pretty much have got the credit card thing figured out, and COD in some cases, and direct bank transfer. And all this is written up in the report. So we still have customer accounts, right? And so even PayPal kicked in there at 50% for international growers, which I thought was quite interesting. Obstacles. Not only did we ask people to think about 5 years from now, how much their revenue was going to be generated from e-commerce, but we asked them, what's keeping you from it now? And these were the number one answers on the board. You can see number 4 and 5 kind of sticking out there, Tim. Well, other parts of the business have required my focus. Okay, I get that. I hear you. There's been a lot of distractions over the last few years, and particularly in 2020. I get that. Number 5, lack of internal e-commerce skills or knowledge. Yeah, and we saw that in the employee data where we had part-time folks that were in charge of e-commerce, right? And most of that was social media marketing probably. So those two were the top 2 reasons or obstacles that firms listed as not embracing this. The second tier statistically involved number 2, 3, 7, 12, and 15. A challenging marketplace. The marketplace is changing too rapidly, and keeping up with this was an obstacle. The lack of financial resources, because as much e-commerce software and the tools are out there, some of it can get kind of pricey, and it has tremendous application if you use it right, but it can be pricey. E-commerce software not focused on our B2B needs. Okay. Finding the right one to fit your needs can be a challenge. And the inability to integrate e-commerce into a broader IT infrastructure. I hear you. You go down one path in terms of your IT, and then all of a sudden you find out you got to have a different infrastructure in place. That's where the expense it racks up there. Now, omnichannel. Oh man, I was excited as all get out. Yeah.
Before we go into omnichannel, we did have a question about your other categories, especially for payment. What does that entail?
So that would include things like some of the responses were, because for anything that was specified as other, we asked them to tell us what that other was. And so for that question specifically, it would be things like Venmo, Cash App, more of those types of payments.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Charlie, it was interesting yesterday. I heard on the news that you refer to PayPal, but PayPal has increased their amount of the amount of users they have by about 60 to 65% this year.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I know. I don't doubt it. And Venmo doesn't surprise me either. Just ask my grandkids. They're experts at it. All right, that's a different issue though. All right, so omni-channel. Let's dive deep in omni-channel. Check my time, 2:30. All right, I'm good. It's because we got to 4:30 Central, right? No, I'm just kidding.
4.
That's
all know
4
you
Eastern. All right, so what are the components that make up your omni-channel strategy? That's the question we asked our sample frame. And you can see the different types there. Their own web store, selling through a distributor's web store, social media, mobile apps, email marketing, a B2B marketplace, call center, physical store. And you can see the top 3: physical store, social media, and their own web shop, right? Those were the top 3 answers by far.
Charlie, with so many people, on the call here today, do you just want to describe for us what omni-channel means for the rookie here?
Yeah. The traditional channel in Floral is where you got, just assume that they're coming from California or outside the country, and they go to a wholesale florist. Let's make it real simple. Wholesale florist to retail florist to consumer, right? And then you introduce supermarkets, and you got all that different side of channel. But that's more of a traditional channel. Omni is multi, right? So you're using both a B2B, the traditional B2B channel, and you may incorporate maybe even a B2C component into, and maybe you have a manufacturer that sells directly to a retailer certain products. And certainly when you look over the last 30 years, the roles of different participants in the industry, wholesale florist, I mean, obviously what the services you provided as a wholesale florist 20 years ago are not the same services you're providing as a wholesale florist today. And that'll continue to metamorphosize as we get more omni in our supply chain. Yeah, cool. All right, so those were the 3 main ones. Again, depending on the type of firm, they had several. Now, remember, we're going back to this list right here, and then you see the numbers. And I've included the other chart up here. Do you consider yourself to be omni-channel? 80%. Absolutely, I'm omni-channel. Well, how many of these omni-channel tool services are you providing? 3, 2, 3, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. We might be saying that we're omni-channel. We may think we're being omni-channel, but in the true definition of omni-channel, we're not very omni, right? So we may be tweaking the system a little bit, but we're not venturing out there in terms of the omni-channel. That was an interesting point to me because of how many conversations I've had at so many conferences about omni-channel strategies and so forth. And all right, we see some movement, but I don't want to describe it as glacial, but it's not happening as fast as what I anticipate it will now post-COVID. I bet we'll see more faster changes. Now, after introducing your B2B e-commerce platform, what are you able to do now that you previously weren't able to do? Well, direct sales, as I mentioned, is one example. That was listed by just shy of 21% of the firms. Added revenue, another 25%. Expand the business was the number 1 answer on the board, 28%. And Melinda, I don't remember us doing this. We didn't define expanding business as to whether they were expanding geographically, whether they're expanding in products and services, or whether they're expanding in terms of, we did ask them about the revenue. So, but we didn't really define expand business, or am I just not remembering that?
No, you're correct. We did not define what we meant by expanding the business.
Okay, but you can see that was one of the things, the primary thing that people listed in terms they were able to do. Some were able to sell via a third party and sell through wholesale distribution. another 7 weren't quite sure. Channel conflict. Does the potential for channel conflict prevent you from selling online? I was very interested in this because in our 41, did we do 41 or 43 interviews, Melinda?
It was 43.
All right, 43. In our 43 interviews, there were at least 2/3 in which channel conflict was brought up. They may not have used those 2 words, but there was some aspect of channel conflict. So I was very curious though how the answer was going to be. And you can see it's mostly skewed to the left here in terms of disagreeing with that. The channel conflict was preventing them from selling online. So that's about 40%. Another 40% were neutral in terms of that question. And then another 20% agreed that, yeah, channel conflict was a big deal, big reason why we didn't sell more online. Now, what are the following features are you looking to introduce to help your customer experience? And that's CX. That's the cool way to say or to show customer experience. I learned that from my millennial students, right? You know, I'd write out customer experience and they type back CX. So now I'm cool and I put CX, enhanced customer experience. What are you doing? Making ordering simpler, easier navigation. You can see I've got them almost in order there. Easier navigation, better product images, detailed product information, improved web store speed, customer management, and then customized products. Those, you can see the percentages there. Now, these are not in the 80s or 90s. But you know, there is a certain group of folks that are focusing in on the customer experience, which I think is the whole reason why we do this to begin with. Now, this is a statistician's heaven right here. This is a dot
It's
plot.
very nice. This is very nice.
This is what we call a dot plot. This is the online revenue. What portion of your company's total revenue is transacted online in the following years? We looked at the last 3 years, 18, 19, and 20. All right. And you can see that the more prevalent, as you go from 0% up to 100%, the more people that give that percentage as their answer, the longer this line gets. So you look down at 0, so 2018, the number of people said that they didn't have any online revenue, versus 19, it's fewer people. And it's fewer people still in 2020, right? And you can see a lot of these lines as you go up get longer, particularly in 2020. And so as you're moving from right to left, each one of these dots is getting bigger, meaning more people are selling a higher percentage or getting a higher percentage of their revenue from selling online. All right. So it went from the mean amount went from 14.5% to just shy of 18 from year over year 2019. And then look, it jumped to 25% almost in 2020. All right. Now I made the statement there. This is being bolstered by COVID-19, but Tim, I think we may this may be another sticker that it sticks with us and it doesn't, we don't drop back to doing things. We already see the trend line just for the last 3 years.
Charlie,
Now,
if I may, we had a question to ask for clarification on what you define channel conflict as.
Yeah, I'm worried about making my customers mad at me because I'm bypassing them, or I'm selling, in addition to selling to them, I'm selling direct. So that's channel conflict, is to making a partner in the supply chain upset with you because of how you have restructured your supply chain.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And that's very real. And it's not just our industry, it's all industries right now. There's significant channel conflict. Now, we also asked the number of SKUs, and right now it's heavily skewed. That's a statistics joke with the SKU. I may be an economist, but I got a great sense of humor, at least in my own mind, right? So I got how many SKUs, store keeping units? Well, it's skewed to the left, right? There aren't that many SKUs. There's more there's fewer SKUs when you combine everybody in terms of the online customers, the number of online orders, and also the SKUs. All right. So, but we're gravitating. There are some folks that have 100 SKUs and they've got 500 orders a month, and they've got 500 customers a month. So there's some folks that are doing this big time, doing it seriously, and that's the whole. You got folks like Lisa Roser, right? 50flowers.com. That's a completely different supply chain channel, and right, that's 100% online. Right? In the height of her business, I think she told me, don't think she'd mind me sharing that, 3,000 weddings a week during wedding season. Dang. And that's an example of supply chain disruption.
Hey, Charlie, quick
Yep.
question and
Yep.
comment. One thing that we found with our brick and mortar retail customers is they reopened in the Northeast after being closed and hadn't brought all their employees back, or they had to have safe, people weren't allowed in their stores, is that we found that on their websites, they really decreased the amount of selections that they had to just focus it on 10 or 15 items rather than 50 items. The supply chain was tough to get product through the system, and a lot of people didn't have enough labor to make the arrangements.
Yeah. And so we did make a concerted effort in reducing SKUs. And you saw that in multiple sectors in the supply chain, even supermarkets, right? You had supermarkets that initially did away with floral because they couldn't afford the floral space in the warehouse. They needed to put toilet paper and other stuff, essentials. Well, that really gets under my skin right there. But they made that. And then when the market opened back up, then they went back to selling, but fewer SKUs. So that happened in the supermarket. It happened on in terms of the number of SKUs that wholesale distributors were bringing in. So there was a chance to do some SKU rationalization. Now that's another big word, but that's a technique that I haven't seen many in our industry use. We get excited about new products and new SKUs, and we should, but we need to be dropping some old SKUs when we bring on new SKUs. And so our industry needed a good dose of SKU rationalization. So, and it took COVID to bring it on. Now that's just my humble opinion, but I think I'm correct there. All right.
I would agree completely, Charlie. I mean, it was a shock to the system for everybody. And everybody realized that, maybe there was just too many SKUs rolling around in the industry before.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was part of that inventory management issue I talked about from the main report. All right. I'm just cognizant of time. I don't want to lose track here. What are the challenges to the implementation of e-commerce in the floral industry? And this was a little different, stated a little differently than the question earlier about what do you expect your revenue to be 5 years, or what were the obstacles to implementing an e-commerce platform. This was in terms of the industry, what were the challenges you think were most prevalent? And low customer awareness was the number one answer on the board, which again, didn't surprise me. When you look down to 32 tools, I bet everybody on here, including myself, before I went down this path of the research, I would have been hard pressed to describe in great detail some of those tools. I could have told you roughly what it was, but I couldn't told you who the main players or the main software packages that are available and so forth. Now I can, because I've done all this investigation. But low customer awareness is a real thing, and then followed by slow internet penetration. I think that's going to change, obviously, after COVID. Security concerns, very real. Lack of trust, again, very real. Those are real concerns. And but it was that awareness that really, stood out. And of course, it varied by the type of firm as to which challenges were the most hard hitting. And again, low customer awareness, you can see almost every single type of firm, it's at least 50% and sometimes more than that. And and security concerns weren't that big of an issue in terms of, wait a minute, I got to go back here. 7.3%. It doesn't pick it up there. I don't even
I think
see
it's a
that.
little bit in the brick and mortar florists.
Okay. All right. So those security concerns, while it may not seem like that big a deal, that's one of the biggest challenges of the e-commerce industry in the United States right now. There are security concerns. I mean, it is such a bigger deal than any of us realized before. And that was before even tampering with elections and so forth. All right. We asked people their strategic view in terms of their business. And Tim, this is where I think it gets really interesting as well, because we asked people how strongly they agreed or disagreed with these statements. The first one was B2B e-commerce is critical to developing a competitive advantage. All right. And so 50% either agreed or strongly agreed. Right. I was pleased, and then somewhat agree. You roughly got 75% of the folks saying they recognize that there is a strategic advantage associated with e-commerce, or a potential. Second, we asked them, how much do you agree with this statement? My company wishes to be considered a leader in digital selling within our market or industry. And again, that was roughly 40%, and 60% if you include the somewhat agrees. And there's some that are unsure here in the middle, neither agree nor disagree. Accelerating B2B e-commerce is a strategic priority for our company. And you can see that's roughly 13, roughly, do the math there. God, math on the spot. It's like, that's a lot, 39%, right? And then 17%. But then you had a few that weren't sure. The last two, real quick. Our company is shifting to selling digitally faster than our competitors. Totally opposite end of the spectrum, right? You had just shy of 30% that said that disagreed with that. And B2B e-commerce is a threat to our sales organization. And here you had 50%, almost 60%, and then another 27% that weren't sure. But I was sure glad to see that they didn't see that as a threat to their sales organization. Because Tim, that's been another, I didn't see this in some of the answers that people told me, but I know in talking with people that in integrating any sort of e-commerce platform, online selling platform, that the transition for the sales team has been very challenging. Just the mindset that they still feel that they are valued and they still feel engaged, and in the midst of also having an online platform. And so I was glad to see that they didn't really pick up on or agree with that particular situation. Now, e-commerce, to be done successfully, needs to be based off data. Is that, are you using data from your e-commerce platform to support or manage key business drivers? And 2/3 roughly said no, and a little over a third said yes. Now it does vary, again, by type of firm, the number of employees, and if they considered themselves to be omni-channel. The more omni they were, Molly, and the more employees that they had, the more likely that they used the data. So the web analytics that I referred to earlier, and the other analytics involved in shipping and so forth, and integrating everything, they relied on data. And there's a term called big data, and that term is thrown around a lot in the business world. But I think that's one of the key success factors for success in the future in the floral industry and any industry, is being able to capture the right data, analyze and compare those against your internal SOPs and metrics that you have for your business, and to run your business based off of those data. So I think that's becoming increasingly important.
Charlie?
Not necessarily going away from the right side of our brains in terms of the art aspects of being in the floral industry.
Charlie, we had a question about e-commerce platforms and your and Melinda's thoughts on whether the industry is moving more towards outsourcing e-commerce, and if so, really, why are they doing that?
Yeah, we didn't ask them whether they were using outsourced packages or whether they are adopting um, packages within their systems. But when you try to read between the lines in terms of the percentages, it sure seemed like there were fewer people buying packages to incorporate into their ERP system, and they were outsourcing more of that, or using a bolt-on rather than an integrated software package. They were using a bolt-on package that they could do this specific function, whether it be customer reviews, whether it be um, live chat, handling live chat. There's bolt-on solutions that you can purchase and not have to mess with your existing ERP software. So I think that is probably where most people are going, at least in the short run, because it's expensive to integrate into your current IT solutions.
I think it also points to, we asked the question, what is the difficulty in integrating? And the top problem was integrating into their broader IT. So I think that really speaks to they're currently struggling, or at least my perception of the response was they are struggling to incorporate into their current ERP system. And so, potentially they are looking at external sources.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you
Good.
both.
Yep. All right. Let's switch gears to talk about buyers. I got 3 minutes, so that's perfect. So that's all I need. Let's talk about it from the buyer perspective. How frequently do you place online orders with your top 10 suppliers? All right. So we're asking them to put themselves in the other shoe as a buyer. It ranges. Daily and weekly is the number 2 answers there. So they're doing it all the time. Now, as buyers, right, we ask them, which of the following factors would persuade you to choose a vendor? Now, this is a sneaky way of getting at a teachable moment, because when you ask me, if you're buying from somebody else, what would you like for them to do for that you would actually choose them over somebody else, to choose this vendor versus somebody else? And the top 3 answers: the ability to track orders online, the ability to order through an online sales portal, and the ability to pay online. Those are the top 3 answers, number 1, number 2, and number 4, right? The others that I have in green were kind of that second tier, important, but not quite as important. The ability to manage returns online, handle customer reviews or reference reviews, product videos, and then the online personalized buying experience. Again, coming back to that customer experience. Fine. So those were the things that they wanted their vendors to do. So it seems to me as though that's, if you want your vendor to do that, then maybe that might be something that you want to offer as well. So there's that element. As buyers, do you prefer accessing the following information online or offline? And we had, product information, inventory availability, payment on invoices, payment terms, returns, pricing. You can see, and all of these are over 50. So the majority of folks say, yeah, we want that information online. So again, if that's what you want from your vendor, seems like your customers would also want that from you. So I think there's a way to look at that. So let me summarize. Obviously, the usage of these e-commerce tools and technologies is mixed among the sectors in the floral industry. I showed you all that table, and then I showed you breakdown by type of firm. So we have some firms that are embracing it like it's ice cream or Christmas present, or they're just all over it. Others, not so much. Omnichannel engagement is increasing, but it's not as pervasive as most think. And most people say that they're omnichannel, but when you dig deep in terms of some of the omnichannel aspects that are incorporating their business, not quite as much as what you might think. Now, and then lastly, the point that I just made, preferences as a B2B buyer that you have of your own vendors, it seems like that would cause you to adopt more broadly B2B e-commerce applications as a seller to your customers. So those were I could have given you another 19 different summary statements, but those were the kind of the top 3 there. And so I've left just enough time to answer whatever remaining questions there are.
And thank you, Charlie and Melinda. We have quite a few questions that have come through, so we'll try to get through as many as we can here. But thank you very much for the time. First and foremost, everyone has asked about these presentation slides and the recording. Every participating association will have copies of both and will be able to disseminate it to their members as they choose. In WFS's case, it'll be on our website and you can log in and access both. So wanted to let everyone know that all this information will be available after the date. Charlie, one of the questions we have is, what advice do you have to use e-commerce for businesses based in Ecuador to do business in the US?
Well, I mean, obviously you're looking at all the transactions that you have with firms outside of Ecuador, right? And so you're trying to facilitate both the ease and the simplicity. Well, that's duplicative, but the ease in which those transactions are conducted, what information they need, what sort of payment, and what sort of pricing mechanisms need to be put into place. And I would look at automating, quote unquote, those types of functions with some of these bolt-in or bolt-on software solutions, some of those things, and or looking at the pain points, right? The pain points of, my dog just came up and checking on me right here. So looking at the pain points, and I've talked all around that answer. So that's about the best advice without knowing specifically that grower's situation. I've kind of given kind of the 10,000 foot view. The more specifics that you know, the more you're able to give more details. And so that's about as detailed as I can go without knowing the specifics. But the key thing is read this report, right? And seeing what all is available, because we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know. And I think when folks start reading this report and they start seeing some of the tools that we talk about, and I didn't even talk about the artificial intelligence, and that was one of the key areas that we asked about too. And so there's applications that are very exciting that we're not even exploring. So I think my very first recommendation to that question, or the person that asked that question, is to read the report and look at the options that there are available for incorporating some of these e-commerce tools and technologies, and look for the pinch points, the pain points, where you can solve a customer's need. You can provide a solution for the customer. That's always a win-win.
Absolutely. We had a question here about, did you at all discuss the use of third-party fulfillment centers across the US in order to take advantage of final mile delivery services like UPS, FedEx, and others?
So did we talk about that?
Did that come up in any of your interviews, any of your questions with any of the?
Oh yeah. In the original report, not in this one, because we had it incorporated in the B2B tools and technology section, right? That was part of it. But in the original report, when we were doing the interviews, oh, absolutely. That last mile, and how do we overcome some of the challenges of that last mile of delivery? And nobody has a real good answer for that yet. We thought we did, we thought we had, but then COVID hit. And so a lot of the tools that were in development, they've gone by the wayside temporarily till we get this thing figured out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Questions still keep coming in, and we're getting close to our time here. So my apologies to those that we won't be able to get to. Do you have any data about the breakdown in B2B versus B2C sales from traditional B2B companies, wholesalers, importers, manufacturers, et cetera?
No, not in this report, because we looked specifically at B2B, and that was one of the issues. We were going to do both, but then we thought PMA was going down the path of doing some B2C work, and they may still be doing that. So we focused on B2B. However, whoever asked that question, email me, because I have market research reports that look at B2C, and I can share some of those with you. That would be kind of a corollary to, it's not floral industry specific, but I think it has some valuable information. And so just email me and I'll send that to you.
Great. Just wanted to, I think we maybe fit in one more question that can kind of surmise everything. A lot of comments here, people saying how great the research is, and thank you. And again, each association has this full 188 pages, Melinda?
Yeah, it's let's see, it's 136.
136 pages.
Yes.
So
This one, the main
This one.
report, the main report's another 100
pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very data rich.
If you were to give this industry a rating on a 5-point rating systems on B2B e-commerce adoption, what would you give it?
Well, being a professor, I'm allowed to grade on a curve. So you get an A+. But no, in all seriousness, I'd give us a C right now in terms of, because as you go through the report, there are certain sectors that are engaging some more of those B2B. Now, for online florists, wire services, our manufacturers, man, I'm going to give them B+. Right? They're using 23 out of the 32 tools already. That's pretty good. Some of those that have, they're using that a little less. Yeah, about a C-.
Yeah,
Right?
I think there's room to grow in a lot of different areas, and room to, I don't want to say improve, but to integrate, because as Charlie said, it probably will become more important as time goes on.
Well put.
Well, Charlie and Melinda, if it works for the rest of the group, if you have a question that did not get addressed, we try to go through as many as we could in the order they were received. You can email them to me directly at mmullins@wfsa.org. I'd be happy to compile those, and perhaps Charlie and Melinda can help us answer them more in depth at a later time.
Yeah, I'm sure
Definitely.
some of them are probably answered by the report itself, but if it's not, then be happy to pull together resources or attempt to, put people in connection with other people, get some, make some of those networking connections and find a solution. That's what this is all about. Get stuff that people can use.
Definitely.
And Charlie, you will be joining us for WFSA's Floral Distribution Conference to go into a little more in depth about this report and offer some additional findings as well for individuals.
Yes, looking forward to it.
I think we all are.
And hopefully we get to do it face to face. Yep.
Tim, any closing comments?
No, I just wanted to thank Charlie and Melinda and all the associations that have been part of making this possible for our industry. For years, we've talked about how do we collect relevant data, put it all together, and present it back out to the industry in a usable format. So I would encourage everybody to read the full report and get access to it, because there's a lot of, you can do a deep dive into all the information and look at your particular segment, whether you're a retailer or a wholesaler or an importer or a grower or manufacturer, and it'll tell the story of the levels of e-commerce activity in your particular business segment. So thank you once again. Thanks everybody for taking your time to join us today.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. Thank you all. Thank you everyone who's on the line.
You bet.
Thanks for participating.
Bye, everyone.